I'm Irene, navigating life at 30 with a mix of web design and motherhood. Our family nucleus was simple: me, my husband Mike, and our 2-year-old sunshine, Danny. Our world was comfortably wrapped within the walls of our home, which stood as a testament to the life we built together. Mike worked for my dad's company, a job he was proud of, and I carved pixels into designs for my home studio. Our routine was pleasantly mundane until one evening at my parents' house, where family dinners were more than just meals. They were gatherings punctuated by discussions, laughter, and, sometimes, life-changing announcements. "So, I've been thinking," my dad began, his voice commanding the room's attention. He was a self-made man, a pillar of wisdom in business suits. "We're expanding the company. There's a new branch opening in the neighboring city, and I want Mike to take the lead on this." Mike, who had always admired my dad, perked up immediately. His eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and determination. "Mr. Thompson, that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm all in." I felt a surge of pride and excitement. "That's wonderful news. We should all move there for the project duration. It's just a few months, and it'll be like a little adventure," I said, already envisioning our temporary life in a new city. Unexpectedly, Mike hesitated, casting a glance that didn't quite reach his usual confidence. "Actually, Irene, it might be better if you and Danny stay here. Moving could be a hassle for the little guy." His words hit me unexpectedly, like a cold splash of reality in our warm, cozy life. "But Mike, I thought we were in this together. And it's not like we have to uproot our lives. I can work from anywhere, and it would be a nice change for Danny." My dad nodded in agreement, his voice echoing my thoughts. "Mike, Irene has a point. The family should stick together in such times. And Irene's job gives her that flexibility." Mike seemed to be caught off guard, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "I was just joking. Of course, you both should come along." But that joke didn't sit right with me. It lingered in the air, an uninvited guest at our family dinner. The evening progressed with Dad and Mike diving into the logistics of the new business venture, but my mind was stuck on Mike's initial reaction. Why the hesitation? Why the reluctance? Later that night, after tucking Danny into bed, I found myself sitting across from Mike in our living room. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. "Mike, about dinner tonight," I started, my voice a blend of confusion and concern. "You really caught me off guard, suggesting that Danny and I shouldn't join you. Is there something on your mind?" He looked up from his phone, meeting my gaze for the first time since we sat down. "Irene, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that setting up a new branch will be demanding. I thought it'd be easier for you to stay put, avoid the stress of moving." I leaned forward, searching his face for the familiar comfort. "But we've always faced challenges together. That's what we do. Why would this time be any different?" Mike sighed, putting his phone down. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You're right, we do. And we will." I guess I was just overthinking it. It was a silly thought, nothing more. His words were meant to reassure, but they hung heavy in the room, a reminder that something in our equation had shifted, however slightly. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've got it all figured out. Our little family was on the brink of a new adventure, or so I thought, until Danny, our 2-year-old bundle of joy, decided to rewrite our plans. It started with a mild fever, nothing too alarming at first, but it quickly escalated. I remember holding Danny in my arms, feeling his little body burning up as I dialed our family doctor. "Dr. Jacobs, Danny's fever isn't coming down." "I'm really worried," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. After a thorough checkup, Dr. Jacobs' expression was serious. "Irene, I'm afraid it's more than just a common cold. Danny needs rest and cannot travel for a while. Moving to a new city is out of the question right now." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I called Mike that evening, the weight of uncertainty heavy in my voice. Mike, Danny's sick. The doctor advised against traveling. We can't join you for now. On the other end, there was a pause before Mike responded. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Oh, is it serious? Well, that's okay, Irene. He needs to get better. We can manage. Something about his response didn't sit right with me. There was an undertone of relief, perhaps even contentment, that Danny and I wouldn't be joining him. It gnawed at me, that unsettling feeling of doubt. The weeks that followed were tough. Danny's illness turned out to be a stubborn infection that took its time healing. My days and nights merged into a blur of caregiving, leaving little room for anything else. Mike's calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his words felt rehearsed, lacking the warmth I was used to. Everything's okay here, Irene. Just busy with work. How's Danny? I'd update him, hoping for more engagement, but the conversations were brief and perfunctory. He's getting better, slowly. We miss you, Mike. Yeah, I miss you guys too, he'd reply, but it sounded hollow, as if he was saying it out of obligation rather than feeling. The distance was growing, not just in miles, but in our connection. It felt like Mike was slipping away, retreating into a world I wasn't part of. One evening, after a particularly short and unsatisfying call with Mike, I sat in the living room long after Danny had fallen asleep. The silence of the house echoed my thoughts. Was this what our life was going to be now? Mike distant and preoccupied, and me, alone, holding down the fort? Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Mike and me felt more than just miles apart. It was as if he was slowly drifting away, becoming a stranger. His calls, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now just formal check-ins. One evening, as I was putting Danny to bed, my phone buzzed. It was Mike. Hey, how's Danny doing? He asked, his voice lacking its usual tenderness. He's better, still recovering, I replied, hoping to stir some emotion in him. Work's crazy here, he said, sounding distracted. I sat down in the living room, the silence engulfing me. Mike, we barely talk these days. Is everything okay with you? You seem different. There was a pause on the line. Different? No, I'm just really busy, Irene. You know how it is starting up a new branch. I tried to keep the conversation going, to bridge the growing gap. I understand you're busy, but it feels like you're not just physically away. It's like I don't know you anymore. He let out a sigh. Irene, you're overthinking it. It's just stress, that's all. Once things settle down here, it'll be better. But his reassurances did little to ease my growing concerns. His words felt empty, devoid of the connection we once shared. Weeks passed, and Mike's brief return home did little to quell my fears. He was physically present, but emotionally distant. He spent most of his time either working on his laptop or engrossed in his phone. One night, I decided to confront him. Mike, we need to talk. You've been distant ever since you took this new job. Is there something you're not telling me? He looked up from his phone, his expression a mix of annoyance and surprise. Irene, why do you keep saying that? I'm right here. But you're not really. You're always on your phone or laptop. It's like you're here, but your mind is somewhere else, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. Mike closed his laptop with a sigh. Look, Irene, I've got a lot on my plate right now. The new branch, the pressures from your dad, it's a lot to handle. I'm just trying to do my best. I nodded, trying to understand. I get that, Mike, but we're a team, remember? If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. He shook his head, a half smile on his face. There's nothing to talk about, Irene. I'm just busy, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a chasm was forming between us, one that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. The day started routinely enough, with the familiar hum of my computer and the soft breathing of Danny during his nap. I was deep in thought, maneuvering through the complexities of a web design project, when a knock at the door jolted me back to reality. Opening it, I found myself face to face with a stranger, his eyes weary yet determined. "Can I help you?" I asked, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. "Yes, you're Irene, Mike's wife, right?" "I'm David." His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of nervousness. I nodded, still unsure where this was going. "That's me." "What is this about?" David took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "I believe your husband, Mike, is having an affair with my wife." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "That's impossible," I stammered, disbelief clouding my thoughts. "Mike wouldn't do that. There's got to be some mistake." "I thought the same at first," David admitted, reaching into his pocket. "But then I found this." He handed me his phone, his hand shaking slightly. The photos displayed on the screen were heart-wrenching. There was Mike, undeniably him, in a series of intimate moments with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, embracing, their closeness leaving no room for doubt. I felt my world spin as I handed back the phone. "Why are you showing me this?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper under the weight of my crumbling reality. David's gaze was sympathetic yet firm. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And I think we should do something about it." A mixture of emotions surged through me, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. "What do you mean, do something about it?" He leaned against the door frame, his posture suggesting a man who had nothing left to lose. "I have a plan. A way to confront them, to bring this out into the open. I can't just let this go, and I don't think you should either." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to shut the door and pretend this never happened, but another, stronger part knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. "What kind of plan?" "We need more evidence, something undeniable. I propose we catch them together, in the act," David explained, his voice laced with a mix of pain and resolve. The idea was daunting, yet it resonated with the part of me that craved closure. "How would we do that?" "I know where and when they meet. If you're willing, we can confront them, together," he proposed, his eyes searching mine for a decision. The thought of facing Mike in such a scenario was terrifying, yet the need for the truth, for some semblance of control in the chaos, was overpowering. "Okay, I'm in. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be." As David left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. The path ahead was fraught with pain and uncertainty, but I knew there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and I had to face it, for my sake and for Danny's. The reality of what David and I were about to do hit me as we sat in the dimly lit apartment next door to Mike's. We were there to unveil the truth, using the thin walls to our advantage. The apartment, ironically provided by my father's company for Mike, was now the stage for uncovering his betrayal. David was setting up a small recording device, his hands steady but his eyes betraying a storm of emotions. "Can't believe it's come to this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Neither can I. But we need to know, right?" As we waited, the silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and questions. Then, the sound of a door opening next door broke the stillness. My heart skipped a beat, and I saw David tense up. "That's them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. We moved closer to the wall, straining to hear. The voices were muffled at first, but then clearer. It was Mike, his laughter unmistakable, mingling with a woman's voice, his mistress. I clenched my fists, fighting back a surge of emotions. The intimacy in their voices was like a knife twisting in my heart. "Are you getting this?" David asked, his voice tight with anger. I nodded, holding the recorder close to the wall. yes, it's all being recorded. The sounds from the other side of the wall continued, laughter, conversation, and then unmistakably more intimate noises. It was excruciating to sit there, hearing Mike betray our family so blatantly. But amid the heartache, there was a growing sense of resolve. We were gathering the evidence we needed, undeniable proof of their betrayal. After what felt like an eternity, the noises ceased, and a heavy silence fell over our makeshift surveillance spot. David and I exchanged a look, a mix of sorrow and determination in our eyes. "We have what we need," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Now we confront them." David nodded, his jaw set. "Let's do it now. No point waiting." As we stood up, I felt a strange sense of empowerment mixed with dread. The life I had known with Mike was over, and confronting him was the first step into a new, uncertain future. "We need to catch them off guard," David said as we moved toward the door. I agreed, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. "Let's go. It's time they faced the consequences." Stepping out of the apartment, the weight of the moment settled on my shoulders. We were about to face the people who had turned our lives upside down. The confrontation would be painful, but necessary. David and I stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Mike's apartment, our hearts racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. The plan was simple, but bold. David would pretend to be a courier, a ruse to ensure Mike would open the door. David knocked firmly, announcing loudly enough to be heard through the door, "Delivery." We heard footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open, and there stood Mike, his face transitioning from annoyance to shock as his eyes landed on me. "Irene? What the hell are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk, Mike. Can I come in?" Behind Mike, the mistress, a young woman with a startled expression, stood frozen. Reluctantly, Mike stepped aside, allowing us entry. The room felt tense, charged with unspoken accusations and fear. Without mincing words, David confronted Mike. "We know about the affair, Mike. You can drop the act." Mike's reaction was a mix of defensiveness and scorn. This is nothing. She seduced me. I was just caught up." His mistress, now visibly shaken, retorted, "What? No, you were as much in this as I was." Ignoring her, Mike turned to me, trying to downplay the situation. "Irene, listen, this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't hold back any longer. "Not what it looks like?" "I heard everything, Mike. We have recordings." Mike glanced at the recording device in David's hand, his face turning pale. "Recordings? Irene, you've got to understand." "There's nothing to understand," I cut him off, my voice rising in anger. "You betrayed our family, Mike. You betrayed me and Danny." He started to say something but stopped, realizing the gravity of his situation. "Irene, please," Mike's voice trailed off as he fell to his knees, a pathetic figure of desperation. "Forgive me, I made a mistake. Please, don't tell your father about this." I looked down at him, feeling a mix of pity and revulsion. "You think I can just forgive and forget? I'm going to demand compensation for this betrayal. And yes, I will tell my father. He deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Mike's face crumpled in despair, but there was no going back. The trust we had was shattered beyond repair. David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "You're going to pay for this, Mike. Both of you." The mistress, now crying, looked completely overwhelmed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." As we left the apartment, leaving Mike and his mistress to their own messy reality, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was painful and heart-wrenching, but necessary. The confrontation was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had ended. Stepping out into the brisk evening air, the weight of what had just transpired in Mike's apartment hung heavily over me. David and I walked in silence to a nearby park bench. The noise of the city around us felt distant, muffled by the shock and turmoil churning inside. David was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Irene. But at least now you know the truth." I nodded, feeling numb. Yes, the truth. I paused, gathering my thoughts. "What are you going to do now?" He looked down, his hands clenched tightly. "I need to think. There's a lot to process. But one thing is clear, I can't stay with her after this." "I understand," I said softly. The reality of my own situation was beginning to sink in. I need to start planning for a life without Mike. For Danny's sake. David looked at me, empathy in his eyes. "If you need anything, any help, just let me know." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, David. I appreciate it." We sat there for a while longer, lost in our own thoughts, before parting ways. As I walked back to my parents' house, where Danny was staying, the magnitude of the situation hit me. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was shattered. When I arrived, my parents immediately sensed something was wrong. "Irene, what happened? You look upset," my mom asked, concern etched on her face. I sighed, not sure where to begin. "Mom, Dad, I found out Mike has been having an affair." The room went silent. My dad's expression hardened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, I'm sure. I heard them, and I have recordings." My mom reached out, taking my hand. "Oh, Irene, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to file for divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I can't be with him after this. It's over." My dad, always the protector, spoke up. "He won't get away with this. I'll make sure of that. And you and Danny will always have a home here." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, grateful for their support. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you both." The final chapter of my marriage to Mike was written in a lawyer's office, amidst a sea of paperwork and legal jargon. The divorce process was grueling but necessary. I fought hard, with my lawyer by my side, to ensure that Danny and I would have the financial security we needed. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Mike's betrayal, a small solace in the wake of our shattered life. Meanwhile, David, the man who had been thrust into my life by our shared misfortune, also finalized his divorce. His wife, once living a life of luxury, now faced a starkly different reality. She had to trade her affluent lifestyle for a job as a saleswoman in a retail store, a harsh consequence of her actions. As for Mike, the repercussions of his infidelity were far-reaching. My father, once a mentor and supporter, was ruthless in his response. He not only fired Mike from the company, but also made it clear that he would use his influence to prevent Mike from securing a position in any reputable firm. The man who once had a promising career now juggled two menial jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Life after the divorce was a journey of healing and rediscovery for me. I focused on raising Danny, ensuring that the upheaval in our lives didn't dim his bright, innocent spirit. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world was a balm to my bruised heart. My work as a web designer provided not just a financial lifeline, but also a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my projects, finding joy and fulfillment in creating and designing. It was a reminder that despite the chaos, I still had control over some aspects of my life. My parents were my rock during this time. They provided unwavering support, offering a safe haven for Danny and me. "You're stronger than you realize, Irene," my dad would often say. And as time passed, I began to believe him. In the quiet moments, often after I had put Danny to bed, I would reflect on the tumultuous journey. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was slowly being replaced by a newfound strength and independence. I had navigated through the darkest of times and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but certainly stronger. As I closed the chapter on a painful part of my life, I opened a new one, filled with possibilities and the promise of a fresh start. My journey was not over, it was merely taking a new path, one that I was ready to travel with hope and determination.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. president of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.